Emptiness. What is emptiness? A misunderstood concept. Some people think it's nothingness. But the best way to understand emptiness in Buddhism, Buddhist context, is empty in nature, arising dependently. So what does that mean? Empty in nature means it's in its core essence. It has no characteristics. It's empty of any kind of characteristics or any kind of any of its relative characteristics that it has on the surface in its manifested, the way that it appears. None of those characteristics are present in its essence. If that sounds like a word salad, then let's use an example. A table. So it's a table on the level of its appearance, on the level of its manifestation. But is it a table in its essence, in some fundamental, unchanging, core, essential way? Is it a table? Well, if it were, then it wouldn't really be able to be anything other than a table. So you might think, well, it isn't anything other than a table. To which I say, for now. It used to be just some planks of wood. And then the planks were assembled in a certain way, and now it's a table. So the planks of wood have nothing that you could call a table. There's nothing about them that you could call a table. They are not a table in any way. But when you put them together in a certain way, they are a table. That's the function that they take on, the form that they take on. So something's appearance on the surface level is to do with its function and its form, the shape, the color, the appearance, and the way we use it. Now, one day this table also won't be a table any longer. If you smash it to bits, it'll be a bunch of bits of wood. If you burn it, it'll be ash. If you take the planks apart and assemble them into some other shape, then they'll be whatever else you make, like a crate or a bed or whatever it is. It won't be a table. So that means that the table, even though it has the appearance and function of a table, it's a table on the surface only. It doesn't have some core unchanging essence that is a table. It can be a whole bunch of things. So if it's not a table on the level of its core essence, then what is it? The answer to that is you can't really say. It doesn't have any characteristics on that level. It's empty on that level. So we say it's empty in nature. So, as I said at the beginning, emptiness is best understood as empty in nature, dependently arising dependently. So empty in nature means the table doesn't have the nature of a table. Its nature doesn't have any inherent characteristics. That's why it can be a table. You can disassemble planks and assemble them into a crate or something, a chair, whatever. And then arising dependently means it becomes a table dependent on how you put it together and dependent on the parts that exist before you put them together into a table. That you have to have these bits of wood, you have to have the planks, pieces of wood in order to do that. And you have to actually do that. That's also another factor that the existence of the table depends on. Somebody has to put it together. And then we have a table. So it's dependent on a whole bunch of things. I mean, you could even take it a few steps further and say, well, in order to have the wooden planks, you need to have a tree, which gets cut down and cut into planks, which means you have to have people to do that. The tree exists only because of water and sunlight and soil and air and all of those things, as well as a whole bunch of other factors like temperature and, I don't know, the parent tree that the seed of the tree comes from, things like that. And the planet Earth has to exist before the tree can exist, and the planet Earth had certain conditions and causes that were necessary for it to come into existence. So all of these, like, you can go on infinitely listing the causes and conditions necessary for the tree to exist, and that's before you even talk about the table. So that's things arise dependent on other things. So they're empty in nature. That means that the table has no fundamental essence or core that has any sort of tableness to it. So it's not a table in its nature, and its appearance of a table, its form and function of a table, is dependent on a whole bunch of other things, and is temporary and subject to change over time, or based on certain other factors, causes and conditions that might arise, such as a person deciding to take it apart and make something else, or deciding to chop it up for firewood or burn it, in which case it'll become something else. Even if you try to preserve it as long as you can as a table, eventually after a sufficiently long period of time, it will, I don't know what happens to a wooden table after long enough, but it won't stay as it is. Everything changes. So why does this matter? Well, everything is like this. Absolutely everything that you can talk about. Everything that is compounded. The Buddha said that all compounded things are impermanent. So all compounded things are empty in nature and arise dependently. So that means not just tables, but trees, rocks, atoms, the planet Earth, people, an individual person, the sun, but also things like situations. A situation has a certain duration, it has certain factors that make it up, that give rise to that situation. Or ideas, thoughts. A thought in your mind arises and passes and then it's gone. You can have the thought again, but that's not really the same thought. That's another thought with the same or nearly the same content. An idea, ideas and thoughts also are, I mean, they're even more obviously ephemeral than things like tables. But they're also, so it's easier to see that those things are empty because they're not really even physical in the first place. But even physical things are also empty. Even if you look at, I mean, you might say atoms make up physical things, and so atoms are not empty, but atoms can be also taken apart, and you end up with neutrons and protons and whatever, and those can also be talked about based on their causes and conditions that are necessary for their existence. Eventually those will cease to exist as well. Scientists have said that eventually everything, all matter, will cease to exist as the energy that makes up the matter disperses, and eventually the energy is at such a low level that it is indistinguishable from space. And at that point, there's no space, there's no time, there's no difference between space and matter. There's no difference between big and small. So at that point, the universe becomes, just emptiness, no form. And then at that point, some scientists say you can have another, because it's very, very big, it's infinitely big, but because there's no differentiation between any no differentiation between anything, because there's no more matter or energy, or there's no differentiation between matter and energy and space, then there's no differentiation between big and small, and the universe from that point of view is then, you can also see it as being very, very small, and at that point it's been theorized that it can then give rise to another Big Bang. Who knows? But at any rate, all compounded things are impermanent and therefore empty of their own nature, meaning a table is empty of its own table nature. It doesn't have any characteristics of a table in its core nature. You as a person don't have any permanent, unchanging core characteristics that could be said to be of a person. So at the end of your life, you'll cease to be this person. And when we realize this, we realize that we're actually one with everything. We're the same as everything. Not just the body, but the mind is inseparable from everything else. And so we're not limited to this physical form, to this lifetime. We are empty, just like everything else. And we are one with everything else. On an ultimate level, there is no differentiation between me and you, or us and the rest of the universe. It's all just a unified reality. And when we see things that way, we no longer get so attached to ourselves, and we no longer get so attached to our possessions, to things which might or might not happen in the future, to things which happened in the past, because when you look at them, you can see that they're actually just different manifestations of emptiness, of dependent arising. They all just arise and pass constantly. And so if we don't get attached to them, then we can just let it all arise and pass and be at peace with how things are. That's emptiness.